Morning and welcome to today's session, today's talk. So, as you see from the title there, is your organizations ready successfully to manage a cyber incident? And so what we want to try and do in our hour together, or just under an hour together, is to look at what are some of the preparation and what are some of the things that you can do to make sure your organization is prepared for managing a cyber incident. Because one of the things I see is that organizations, especially, I was going to say large organizations, they're probably the ones we see in the news, but all organizations managing cyber incidents seem to make the same mistakes again and again and again. And, some of the sort of blatantly obvious stuff you can do is stuff you can do to prepare now. So the aim of this talk is to tell you guys, what are some things you can do now? What are some of the things you could put into place? Incident management is not a science, otherwise you'd have a computer and an algorithm to do it for you. So there will always be ambiguity, there will always be decisions. Sometimes decisions might be right, sometimes decisions might be wrong. We can't prepare for the nth degree because even if we have 2,700 playbooks for every different sorts of cyber incident we could ever have, the cyber incident we face is something that is going to be different to what we've thought. So what we need to do here is, what I want to highlight is some of the sort of basic preparation you can do, which will be the old sort of military adage, train hard, fight easy. So do some of the things you can do now, which is going to make it easier to respond to a cyber incident on the day. The other bit, just to make it very clear from what we're talking about here, is I am not a technical person. So if you want to chat about endpoints and security, securing your network and all those good technical things technical cyber companies do, this is not what we're talking about today. So this is really focusing in on the crisis management, crisis communications, leaving your IT people and your technical people to do the magic that they do, and it is magic. To me, it's magic. So they can do the technical response, leaving us to do the crisis management, the decision making, the situational awareness to manage the incident. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I could spend all morning giving you apocryphal slides about apocryphal things, good quotes that people have, so I'm not going to do that. But just a couple of ones. I like this one. I think there's always a little bit of a difficulty with, if you are a non-technical layman, how do you interpret what your IT's people are doing? Because they can give you all the stuff of, we've done this and we've done that, and really, is that good? Is that bad? Is that what you're meant to do? So I think we have to trust them to do their kind of, they've done, their preparation appropriate to your organization, and it's to your risk appetite, and it's to what you can afford, because you can spend infinite amounts of money on this. I think some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today is actually quite, in the grand scheme of things, pretty cheap, and probably much more cheaper than some of the fancy software and tools and AI and all that good stuff you can get. So I think always, just come back to this quote, I think always take what your technical guys say with a pinch of salt. And anyone who says it won't happen to us, almost like you need to walk away, because we know it could happen to anyone. I'll just come on to that one. Another quote, this is Crowdstrike, who do denial of access attack software. But I think the point here is, often people are in your systems for weeks, so that you might be being attacked at the moment and you wouldn't know. So, again, there could be an incident going on and someone could be in your system and you don't know. So, don't say it's not happening to you, because it could be happening this very second. You just don't know. And just one of the sort of last slides on this, the apocryphal bit. This is the Sunburst, which I'm sure if you take any interest in hackery stuff, this is the hack of 18,000 different companies and some of the sort of top branches in the US military. And have a look at those people. You see the top right of that site, Immersive Lab. They do some brilliant webinars on this and podcasts and all sorts of good stuff. So anyone who wants a sort of layman's view, have a look at what they do, because they have some really good stuff on there. But these guys talking about this attack were just bowled over by the ingenuity and the way it was exercised. So this was brilliantly deployed and done, and very cleverly executed is what I was looking for them. And if you read any sort of cyber, they say, oh, you must patch your systems, much patch the system. What these did is the exploit and the way of getting into the system was hidden in a patch. So, can you win in the end? I don't know. So basically what we're saying here is that if all these 18,000 top companies and 5 top branches of the US military have been attacked, then, I rest my case is to say, this could happen to anyone. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of chronologically take you through a little bit of a journey of a typical ransomware attack. So we're talking ransomware attacks today. And I want to talk to you about some different stages in it and about some of the preparation you can do and some of the things you can think about for doing this. So you can see the steps there, everything from, the hack and how they got in there through to informing your customers. So those are what we're going to talk about generally this morning. So the first thing is, if you look at the top right there are lots of different ways. This is from Kaspari Labs. There are lots of different ways businesses, this is a little bit, it's got charities as well there, can find out about a ransomware attack. And if you see there, it's mainly from staff, but you can see there's a few other ways there. This is on the left there. This is from, I just found this on the internet. This is the information that's come up on a screen to tell you of a hack. And that's from the Conti gang who hacked SEPA. And we'll come on to SEPA there. One of the first things you need to be aware of in your hack is these companies, they're going to do a ransomware attack, make it bleedingly obvious that you've had an attack. So it will not be some tiny thing on the screen, because they want you to know that you've been ransomware. Because if someone's attacking you and you never know, and you never get a ransom demand, then you're not going to pay it. So the first thing is they make it bleedingly obvious, and there have been cases when they've even rung up the company if they don't think they're getting the message or don't think the message got through. They've rung up the company to tell them. So in your first thing, it's probably going to be bleedingly obvious you've had a ransomware attack. And so that plays in some interesting bits about secrecy. So can you keep this secrecy in a company if part of being ransomware is making it obvious that you have been done? So if there's a screen at every single person's screen on your laptop, then an awful lot of people are going to know. There could be the possibility that it's more discreet, or maybe the IT's picked it up and not being everybody knows about it, but in there you got your IT help desk, your IT people. How are you going to maintain secrecy, or do you accept that you can't maintain secrecy? If you maintain that you can't maintain secrecy because too many people know about it, then you have to think about the speed of your communications. So can you tell people quickly, especially internally, what to do, and also has been an event? And then even if you can keep it discreet within your company, you have or your organization, you probably have a limited amount of time before it leaks. And if it leaks, we come on to one of the last slides, is how you're going to deal with. You don't really want your key customers, your key stakeholders, to find out from either rumor, social media, or the BBC News. You really want to be trying to tell them yourself. So one of the things is you're going to have limited amount of time. And if you've got limited amount of time, you've probably got limited amount of thinking time. So the more you can automate, or the more you can think through about how you're going to do things, the quicker it's going to happen. Now, there's also my thoughts about where else can it come from. Some of that's not the Caspari one, but I've seen other places where it's come from third-party suppliers. Now, if you look at the Sunburst one, it was FireEye who was one of the customers of the SolarWinds, who provided the antivirus software, which got hacked, noticed that some of their tools had gone missing and told the SolarWinds people. So it could be one of your suppliers that noticed the hack and then informs you. Could possibly be a third party. It could be the police, it could be a third party there, or it could be some threat assessment, and we'll talk about threat assessment. But even if you're not paying for threat and assessment, you still might find that someone might say, look, I've seen that company, it's come up in our threat assessment, I know somebody who works there, I think I better tip them off. So the first thing of my kind of 101 things to think about is think about how you're going to retain secrecy, how these things are going to might come to you. You should be aware of the sort of risk profile of your own organization. And then my bottom slide there, once you got the detection, then the normal process is you detect something, it's reported to the health desk, they triage, because that's probably your normal sort of IT procedures. And then actually, how is that going to be reported up to sort of senior management? Now, quite often, most organizations have the P1, T2, ITAL type communications. And, P1 events, which could be a sort of ransomware attack, might be reported up. But you just have to then check through yourselves and say, does that work in a cyber attack? Does that work when we need to deal quickly with it? Does that provide the secrecy you need? So that's some thoughts on the hack. We then want to talk about your response. And in terms of ransomware, at the moment, forgetting a little bit the nation state, the Sunburst, where they're after particularly kind of government information, or if we talk about some of the hacks around about the virus, as we're concentrating on ransomware today, there are two different, or maybe even three different sorts of ransomware. And there's basically the single extortion, which you can see underneath that, under the yellow one, which is this University of California laboratory, where they get into your systems and they lock out your systems. Now, on the whole, just think about this: is people who do ransomware, it's a business. It's an extortion business, but it's a business. And so the peeling, on the whole, the people who are successful this and do this well are well organized, well motivated, and they know what they're doing. So on the first bit of ransomware, yes, you could get ransomed by someone who doesn't know what they're doing. But on the whole, if you get done by someone who's serious about it, then it is very difficult or nigh on impossible to get back your systems by just brute forcing it or finding the key. So normally when you're locked out, you have two choices. You either pay the ransom or you go back to some sort of tape or go back to your backups. We'll talk about backups in a second. But so there isn't an easy option to try and get the stuff back. So the first thing is they'll try and extort you for getting your systems back. Now you can look at, if you just speed read the information on this one, they thought they kind of put it under the COVID and vaccines, so they kind of justified it to say, right, you know, we need to get these systems back, so we're happy to pay. So that's the first thing, is ransom there. If you look at your Grubb, Sires, Melsmers, and Sachs, this is a double extortion where they lock the systems out. So this is a media lawyers in the States. And what they did is they got something like 7 terabytes of their data. Now, these are guys that organize celebrities and singers, basically, their contracts. They do, pop star contracts. So these guys locked out on their systems, but they went out and said, right, Maya Kiri, I think it was one of the persons, we're going to put all our stuff on the dark web, we're going to auction it to the highest bidder, and we want someone to pay for that stuff. And either someone who's interested will pay for it, or maybe Maya Kiri might want to say, well, actually, I don't want all this stuff coming out, so I will pay for it. So basically, the normal process for doing ransomware is that, and this is one where it's targeted, not the kind of WannaCry with the NHS where that was untargeted. This is where they're looking at you as a company. They say, we're going to extort you. And what we are going to do is get into your systems. We then have professional people who look at what data do we want, what is interesting, what is extortable. They will extract that data, and then the last thing they'll do is lock out your system as they go out. So we've got that double extortion. And then there is a triple extortion where they might sometimes even go to the people whose data it is and say, maybe you don't want your data going out, maybe you want to pay for that data. So that's a normal response. Now, if you've been ransomware, one of the things you'll want to know as a management team is, well, who is it? What are they doing? You want to know something about the software, but you want to know something about the organization. And so this is where threat intelligence is really important in terms of ransomware, because there are, and your technical people will talk you through, or there's, I'm sure, lots of consultants out there that would like to help you with this, is they can look at the software and tell you, first of all, what the software is and where it's come from. That will give you a good idea of who's doing it. And if you look at this company up here, which is, I just can't read it. Well, I say, I've got another slide with it in. This is their pay. These are ransomware negotiation people. And they have a page on the Conti network, which is the people who ransomware CIPA, and they've got a whole page on that's what the average price of what they get, how long does negotiation normally take. You also want to know is actually, if you pay the money, I'm not saying you should do, if you pay the money, whether you're going to get your data back. And they say for the Conti network, if you pay the ransom, you're probably very likely to get your data back because their data retrieval software is very good. So I think there's a thing you need to be playing into either your plans, your playbooks, is to get that in threat intelligence, so at least your senior managers can know who they're dealing with. You know, there's a long time ago, I used to I helped organize kidnap plans. This is anti-kidnap plans on behalf of an organization. And speaking to the people who did the ransom negotiation for kidnap victims, what you want to do is deal with a professional kidnapper, because they know the scheme, they know how it all works, and they want the money. What you don't want is to deal with a kind of random person, the one you've seen on the kind of Silent Witness and all these detective shows, who just kidnaps someone, doesn't really know, hasn't thought it through, doesn't know how to look after the person. If they get spooked, the first thing to do is kill the person, and you're not going to get them back, and they're not going to get the money. So understanding who you're dealing with can then inform your decision making, and whether you want to pay the ransom or don't, or you want to even, who you're dealing. Are you dealing with, they should say, are you dealing with maybe somebody who hasn't been seen before? Maybe you're dealing with someone who's kind of done a few failed attempts, and actually that they don't even know how to decrypt it. People might be able to tell you that and say, well, actually, there's no point even entertaining paying it because I'm never going to get it. So I think there is some good news for crisis teams in understanding your threat intelligence and understanding what you're dealing with that. Because I think if I was a crisis management team member, right, we know who we're dealing with, that makes it easier to understand, make the decisions. I think the other thing is you need to have a bit. So that's the who's doing it and what's their history. I think you need to have a think about internally is what is your level of skills now. It's a bit hard for us as kind of the business continuity people going around and poking your IT manager or CISO or whoever's managing your IT in the chest and go, oh, my good man or woman, what is your cyber skills for dealing with an incident? But I do think you need to be, as an organizer, honest about what are your skills, what skills do you have internally, what skills you don't, and what level is your sophistication for dealing with this. So, and maybe for CISOs and information security people to be honest about what they do know, what they don't know, and what skills you might need to buy in because they don't have the skills to do this. So you need to have some conversations in the team. So that's your response. There is lots of frameworks. So you can see the NIST cybersecurity framework. That's more American. There's the CREST cybersecurity framework. So lots of frameworks for going through. And there's a Scottish one I can show you in a second for dealing with an incident. So have that conversation internally about threat, understanding the threat, and making sure you have those processes for understanding who you're dealing with. The next one is about incident management here, and I think there's a few things to hear. If you say, right, actually, I need to get a company in because our cybersecurity isn't great, and we think we need to get the Deloitte or the cybersecurity people in here. And I just saw this with the client I'm working with at the moment. We need to get them in there to give us a framework and playbooks and all the good stuff that consultants do. Quite often, what they will do is to say they'll recognize we need a kind of team for dealing with the incident. And what they try and do is they try and sort of merge an IT technical team with a kind of gold strategic crisis team, whatever you want to call it. And I think you need to be quite clear in there are two very different jobs going on there. And also, if you have a framework for dealing with other sorts of incidents, you need to fit your cyber response in with that framework and don't have a separate cyber response framework. And if you don't watch it, what happens is you let IT go off and do their cyber response framework, and they will have a sort of team for dealing with it, but they'll merge the technical team with a few kind of bits and pieces from your gold team, and it won't fit within your existing strategic framework. So to me, I think you very clearly need two different groups. You need your gold team or your strategic, your crisis team with the things on the right. So you need to have, they're going to do your policy. They're going to have your recovery strategy, because your recovery strategy may be to pay, and that's a just key decision as well. That's one thing. If your recovery strategy is to actually rebuild, that's fine, but there might be some different instance you decide upon, some which may be quicker, some which may be slower. So there'll be some key decisions to be there. Key to this is a technical response, because you need to get your operations going. But the flip side is that is also absolutely key to your communication strategy. Because if you can keep your stakeholders on side and keep them up to date and tell them what you're doing and be open and honest with them, then you are much more likely to keep their goodwill, and you're much more likely to come out this with, you know, your reputation intact, and to be able to go forward from this. So all those crisis management roles or responsibilities are very, very important. And I think it's important you keep them separate from the IT technical bit, because your IT technical people are going to be doing lots of techie stuff, which I think it is good to have a separation so they can do their technical stuff with very close management between the two. But I don't think, you know, you want to spend hours discussing the finer points of eradication of the ransomware. The crisis team doesn't want to get involved in that. That's the technical response. You know, the IT technical team maybe just takes the crisis team the key decisions. I think with your communications teams, why put them slightly separately? They may be, you may have a communications role between in your sort of crisis team, but I think in a major incident, you need a team of people to deal with it. One person alone cannot deal with it. And quite often, as seen on sort of crisis team, you have the communications person, fine, but they need a staff or a team of people, because often, especially with this, there is so much going on that you can't get away with just having one person do it. Third-party technical support, or we've got support type twice, very important. I do think that you need to be very clear on what you know and what you don't know. If you can do forensics, if you can do all elements of response, and big organizations can, you may not need a third party. If you think you can't, you will need a third party. What I would, and I do think cyber insurance is massively important, because that will give you, first of all, often a technical response as part of the insurance. So they'll be able to fill in the gaps that your guys can't do. Your guys will always know the technical elements of your systems. So, you know, an ex-SIDO will know the finer points, but they will be able to bring that technical expertise of dealing with ransomware, because they deal with it all the time. You don't want to be Googling that on the day. And if it's an incident which maybe affects multiple companies, there may not be companies out there, or you'll get a massive bill, because I don't expect cyber people to come cheap, especially if your back's against the wall and you're going to have to pay, you know, 2,000 quid a day. So you want the cyber insurance that will pay for those expertise, will guarantee your expertise. And quite often cyber insurance people will actually pay any ransom. So, you know, I would say you need some third-party support, whatever that looks like, whether it's cyber insurance, whether it's a company you're working with, maybe you've got the expertise in time, but make sure you've got this in front, organized in front, and make sure you know what you're doing. And then you might have the third party. So, you know, if you're a government body or an important organization, you'll have the NCSC. But again, what's wrong with talking to the NCSC and saying, what help will you give me? And if it's none, it's none. Well, that's fine. You know, what help are the police going to be to you? You know, maybe even if you're trying to do an exercise, and they're willing to, they might come along to your exercise and they might say, oh no, we don't want you to say that communications. You say, well, we're very keen to be open and honest because we think that's a good way to respond. And there may be different parties there that's important. Just Scottish Business Resilience Centre have Mark who if you don't have cyber insurance and you're a small company, then his number's on their website and he can help you and post in the right place. And, you know, just to have that friendly face, a friendly number, someone who's your side, who's not going to cost you £2,000 a day for just picking up the phone. I'm not sure that that's just a made up figure for me, so they might cost less. But, you know, to have a friendly person who can advise you in the right direction, you're a small business, then they provide a good service for that, and he can signpost you in the right direction for people to help. So that's the incident management framework you need to do. But my main part is think about your third parties. Also think about the split of the crisis team, and make sure that IT haven't got a plan which they haven't shared with anybody. And that's, you know, they've had some consultants in, or they've had someone to organize the cybersecurity, and there's a plan there, but it doesn't take account of your existing plans. Playbooks. I quite often go into people and say, have you got playbooks? And they say, yes, you have. And I say, well, what's playbook cover? I think there's two different sorts of playbooks. There is firstly, which is on the left, and that's just a cover of a Scottish cyber incident response one. I just found it on the internet. Looks quite good, done by NCC, so it looks sort of quite professional there. So that's on the internet. There are technical playbooks for the technical bit, and you can see all that sort of thing. When you have a look at a technical playbook, so you ask IT if you've got technical playbooks. Yeah, they've got technical playbooks. What you need to check is that cyber incident ransom, great playbook's got lots of good stuff, good sequencing, but it's not tailored to anybody because it's a generic document. You need to, and you know, what level do you plan for? But you need to be clear on, they need to be clear on what level of technical. Do they just have a generic one, or do they have a detailed one for your organization? And you need to check that one, because that makes quite a lot of difference. If they've done a technical playbook for your organization, they know how to recover systems, that's going to save an awful lot of time, because they've done it, they've practiced it, they've developed the playbook, they may be developed by practicing it. That's very different from having a generic playbook there, which you've taken off the shelf, and it has lots of good stuff in it, and it had maybe what people are, who's going to do what, but it doesn't say what are they going to do. The flip side of this is, I think you need to have crisis playbooks, and these are for, so this is one you could write for your crisis team. Now, these are non-technical playbooks which deal with the finer points of dealing with a ransomware. So you might have your generic crisis management team, which is there to manage anything you might have. And then I think in your crisis playbook, you need to have something to say, right, if we have a ransomware incident, how are we going to manage the incident? So we're going to have our crisis team. Are we going to have, if you've got a kind of gold, silver, bronze structure, you might say in a cyber event, I'm going to have my gold, and my silver team, or I might just have a gold team, or I might have all three, you know, because you might need to be responding and doing your business continuity, so you might need all three levels. But what you do is you basically state out what's your incident management structure, and is it slightly different? You're going to have an IT, maybe you're going to have an IT technical team, when normally in part of your plans you don't have them. Would be interesting to have maybe to thought through what are the impacts. So if you're a ransomware attack, you can actually very, very quickly say, right, this is going to have an impact on and you have a nice list, rather than having to go emailing around all your managers and say, like, we looked out of all our system, what's the impact? And what's our impact on deliveries, and what's our impact on our delivery to customers, and all that sort of stuff. So you have the impact. You can have details of your third-party support. So how do you call them out? Who are they? What they've done? I think there is a well, I know one of the jobs you have to do, we cover this in the course next week, is about this possible data loss, and this horrible word, I think, crown jewels, is understanding what you have to lose. So understanding how much data you have to have, understanding if they got into all your system, what they could have had, and understanding that, what's the most embarrassing bit of information we hold? If it was leaked, how would it affect us? This work should have been done in it fast, a bit like the work you did for GDPR as part of that. And so that may be in this document, but at least you can refer to it. So you can say, actually, we don't hold passport numbers, we don't hold credit numbers, but we hold details of 3,000 members of present front staff. I think there's also a very important part is understanding your capabilities under different scenarios, because if you get a properly good ransomware attack that takes out all your systems, similar to the one that's got with SEPA at the moment, you are going to lose data. If you're rebuilding from scratch, you are going to lose data. So you need to understand is under different scenarios, how much data can you lose? And you also need to know is if you need to rebuild your systems because you're not going to pay, then actually you need to understand that, and how long does it take to rebuild. And there's a case of Hackney at the moment, Hackney Council, which didn't get the whole systems, but they're parts of the council, and you still can't, and 3 months later they still haven't got some of their systems back, especially the one to do with house searches, which you need the council to do to buy a house. So some of these things take a long time. At least if you know it, that's your starter for one. So what actions support you, those affected? So are you going to give people credit checks? If you're not, how are you going to do that? And if you're going to offer credit checks, I think you should go out there and try and think about, is that appropriate? If you want to offer them quickly, maybe you want to have a contract with a company so that you can say, if we need it, we can implement it very quickly. Otherwise, it might take 3 months to organize, or 3 weeks to organize. What are the risks, issues, and decisions? Let's list them out front. We might not want to list our decisions, but let's put them out there. Or if we say, and for lots of organizations, we will never pay a ransom. Fine, let's list that out there. We've decided that in advance. We've had a discussion. We're comfortable with that. Let's move on. So that is implicitly stated there. There will be risks and issues, which you always just list there and think, right, that's what we need to do. Considerations for paying a ransom, if you need them, your communications with your stakeholders. There's a huge bit, I'll come on to regulatory reporting in a second then, but that should be listed, and what your priorities and objectives. In a ransomware attack, you should be able to envisage it, so you should be able to have at least a starter for one of your priorities and objectives for doing that. Ransom payment. Implicitly, my thoughts is you don't pay. And if you look at SEPA, they were able to get quite a lot of kudos because they say, look, and their CEO said, we're not going to spend public money on extortion attempts. Why not? There will be consequences to them not paying because it'll take longer to recover, but upfront, and I suspect for a lot of, and they've also done Scottish government companies a big favour, because the fact is that as this is a business, they're not going to hopefully then go to another Scottish government organisation, see their pay. Hopefully they'll go to a French one or a Canadian or somebody else, because I think they spend lots of time and effort on doing the extortion attempt. So if they think the rest of the Scottish public sector is not going to pay, they're unlikely to try and trade on the Scottish sector. That's just my view. It may not be true. I had a very good conversation with a guy called Mike from Group Sense, who was a professional ransomware negotiator. And these Coveware are, again, and you can see their little process, and that was upfront on their website. They will negotiate your ransomware payments for you. So, you know, if you think you might even pay, then use somebody professional who does it. Well, that was their word. They've obviously done their homework, so they know how much you can afford. So they won't say £1 billion. They won't say £10. They'll do so much you can afford. For many organizations, this is a moral issue. So there's a very good case of Hydro, an amalgam smelter in Sweden, I think it was. Scandinavian states, and they say it is not in our credo to pay, so we are not paying. Cost them £60 million to rebuild their systems, but they went away saying we don't do extortion, and if it costs us money, fine, we're happy with that. So, you know, it may be in a lot of your organizations it's not in your values to pay, and actually the best thing is the fewer people pay, less likely it is to people to do it, because they're not making any money. And I was speaking to that Mike and he was saying, you always have to remember in these events, it's a business transaction, it's not personal. So don't try and go and say these people are out to get me. It's just they've seen a weakness in your organization and they see an opportunity to make money. Not personal, it's just a transaction. You are the target because they think they make money out of it. Notice they will always do this the worst time. So as soon as I saw the SEPA hack on Christmas Eve, you kind of think that's not by chance, it's on Christmas Eve. Or TravelX have done on New Year's Day, so they will go at you when they think it is the least there. Use a negotiator you want. You have to check about payments. If you're going to pay, then the United States are bringing laws in where you can be prosecuted and pay, and even if you pay through third parties, you can be prosecuted. And it's not illegal, I understand, in the UK to pay ransoms, but if you pay it to a terrorist or if you pay to a person on a prohibited list, you can be prosecuted. If we all didn't pay, then we wouldn't have this event, but it is out there. And it is, I think, every different company, I would always say don't pay, but I think you need to understand that it's often it's more nuanced than that. The reasons to, the reason against, and you have to do it. I think it's within your culture and your morals and the impact on your business, and you have to go and decide upon that. So it's worth thinking about in advance. Just Interforming customers, I know coming, I'm just keeping an eye on the time there. As soon as you inform customer, as soon as you know about it, you need to inform your customers, and you need to think how about. So you need to have a good list of who you need to do, how you're physically going to tell them. Ransomware takes out all your email, so how you're going to get hold of them. Ransom takes out, you can see Hydro, which is the top right up there, taken out their website. So they've got a just holding site on the website. You can see Dundee College were very good at their communications when they were ransomware, and they used Twitter and Facebook to provide information because, again, their website was taken out there. If you're going to get your email taken out, or even not your email taken out, how are you going to inform people? And the email from Marriott telling all the people their loyalty accounts had been hacked looked like it was from a fraudulent email. So again, and there is lots of fraud. You see lots of fraud on the back of COVID. There'll be lots of fraud on the trying to be attempts on the back of your event. So you need to be very clear in your communications to make sure that your communications don't look, or your customers can be crystal clear it's actually come from you and not a third party trying to scam them. So in that kind of whole informing customers really needs to be thought through. And we did some work with a big private bank, and these are people discreet. They bank with this bank because it's like sort of 300 years old. And if they find out from the news that their accounts may be compromised, they'll be really, really upset. So, we were starting thinking about who are your top customers, who are the ones that actually you need to have a private phone call with, and you need to have that quick to be able to get it before they knew about it in the news. And you might not be able to get out to all your customers, but are there certain people you say, actually, these are the people who I really, really need to talk to? So informing customers, don't forget about call desks, help desks as well. So if you've got to set up a help desk for people to give information to, how are you going to do that at short notice? And can you deal with different languages as well? Because you might have different customers around the world. That was one of the problems that Marriott had, and they were quite good at getting a call center up and going fairly quickly. Informing customers, big job, needs to be thought through. Statutory reporting. I can't see the chat here, but maybe you can put in the chat. Anyone put it? How do you know how quickly you need to report to the ICO? And it's 72 hours. You've got 72 hours to report to the ICO. But for all you regulated industries, especially financial industries out there, there are a number of different redundant reporting to different bodies. So Bank of England, potential regulatory authority. So all those different authorities, you need to check on what their regulatory requirements are and how quickly they need to know, what they need to know, have the conversations before them. Now, one of my questions for you as a go is, if you had an office in Uzbekistan and your organization's data was compromised, then actually how do you report that data breach in Uzbekistan? And actually, I can tell you they've got a new law, which is law number ZRU 747 on personal data, dated on the 2nd of July 2019. And that's their law. I couldn't work out in their law. I didn't read it in detail, what you need to report and when. But you need to make sure that in every jurisdiction you hold data in, then you need to make sure that you do the reporting. Because if you don't report in the right jurisdiction, either you or your staff could be prosecuted. So you need to do your homework. And that could be, if you're a large multinational or you operate outside the UK, then you should have some serious pages all about actually what you need to report when and how. So that is a sort of overall view of the some different things you need to have a think about. If you do all that stuff and have that all prepared, there's no guarantee that you're going to have success, but hopefully you can see getting the basics and doing your homework and having conversations and having a list of jurisdictions you operate in all takes the pressure off. All things, I don't need to go and find out stuff. We've had the debate on the ransomware, pay or no pay. We know we're not going to pay, so let's not even contemplate that. We're not even going to pay £10. We're not going to contemplate that. We know it takes 2 weeks to recover because we've done our homework on that. We know we're going to lose 24 hours worth of data. We know that. We can then go out to our customers. We can then go out to the press and say, yeah, we're going to lose some data. So if you've emailed the last 24 hours, send the email again. In 2 weeks we're up and going, or speak to us, or whatever else you do. Your website is going to stay up because it's not connected to your main system. So it is going to stay out. So you're going to do some dark web. So there's so much stuff you can do to try and make it easier on the day. And you see big companies, the Travel X's of this world, are, they just did everything wrong. And it's just because, with all this incident management, that's why we're employed to do this. Because if you do some stuff now, it makes it easier on the day. Doesn't make everything going to work, but at least it tries. So that's my plea to you. Just in terms of things we can always do to help you. So cyber gap analysis. So we can do a gap analysis for you on all the stuff we talked about today. And so we can check what preparation you need to do. And especially if you're looking for money, or if you're looking for, looking for things to get done in your organization, and they're not listening to you, get a consultant in, we can write the report and they'll listen to us, all the same stuff that you've been saying, but you can do a cyber gap analysis. Do an exercise, practice it. Gee, get the muscle memory, get people practicing out there, or come on the cyber course and then you can learn how to do it for yourself. And there's lots of good stuff in there.